Virgo, I need you to understand something before we go a single step further into this reading. What came through when I sat with your energy today did not arrive with the measured, careful, gradually assembling quality that most readings carry. It did not come through as a gentle impression that I then shaped into language with the usual attention to nuance and precision and the careful balancing of difficult truths against the need to deliver them in a way that can actually be received. It arrived hot, not as metaphor, as an actual, palpable, unmistakable quality of heat that came through the moment I made contact with what is actually happening around you right now. The specific, concentrated, entirely justified heat of a situation where someone made a fundamental miscalculation about who they were dealing with, where that miscalculation has now been exposed in a way that cannot be walked back or smoothed over or repackaged into something less damning than what it actually is, and where the universe itself seems to have an opinion about how this particular story ends. Because somebody thought something about you, Virgo, something specific, something they believed with enough confidence to act on, to make decisions based on, to build an entire approach to you and to whatever dynamic existed between you around something they were so certain of that they did not even bother to disguise it particularly carefully, because why would you disguise something from someone you are completely sure cannot see it? They thought you were stupid. They thought you were stuck. They thought you had no idea what your own worth actually was, and that this gap between what you offered and what you understood yourself to be worth was something they could use, exploit, benefit from without consequence. Because the person on the other side of the equation was never going to figure out what was actually happening. They were wrong, Virgo, on every single count. And this reading is about what that wrongness has cost them and what it has given you, and why the universe does not, in my experience, let this particular category of miscalculation go unanswered for long. Stay with me, because what came through today is one of the most vindicating things I have had the privilege of delivering. Let me tell you how this message arrived, because the process of it is itself significant. I sat down, I set my intention, and before I had even fully settled into the space of the reading, before the usual gradual gathering of impressions had time to begin, something arrived that I can only describe as a verdict. Not a process of reading and interpreting and translating from the energetic into the verbal, a verdict, already delivered somewhere, already decided, already carrying the full weight of a conclusion that had been building for however long this situation has been in motion, and that has now, in this moment that you are sitting with this reading, reached the point of being simply and completely true. The verdict is this: they were wrong about you in the most total, most comprehensive, most every single assumption they made way possible. And the universe has a very specific way of responding when someone is wrong about a Virgo in the particular way that this person was wrong about you. It does not respond with drama. It does not arrange for public humiliation or theatrical reversals of fortune, or any of the satisfying but ultimately shallow forms of cosmic justice that make for good stories but rarely reflect how things actually work. It responds with truth, with the simple, quiet, completely devastating arrival of reality in a form that cannot be argued with because it is simply what is. What is, Virgo, is not what they thought. Let me go back to the beginning, the actual beginning, because understanding exactly what this person decided about you and why they decided it and what they built on top of that decision is what makes where things now stand so completely and perfectly just. There was a moment, a specific one, even if it seemed unremarkable when it occurred, where this person looked at you and made an assessment. Not a careful one, not one that was arrived at through genuine attention to who you actually are, through real observation of how you think and what you perceive and what you are capable of when you are operating at the full capacity of your extraordinary intelligence. The assessment was arrived at quickly, lazily, even through the specific cognitive shortcut of someone who had already decided what category you belonged in before they had done anything close to the actual work of understanding you. They saw what they wanted to see, what was convenient for them to see, what made the thing they wanted to do or get or take or maintain easier to justify to themselves. And what they wanted to see was someone who did not know their own value, someone who could be offered less than they deserved and who would accept it, someone who was, in their assessment, sufficiently unaware of what they were actually worth, that the gap between that worth and what was being offered to them would simply not register as a gap at all. I want to name something about why someone arrives at this assessment because it matters for how you understand what was actually happening underneath the surface of whatever this dynamic looked like from the outside. People who decide that someone else does not know their own worth are not usually responding to evidence of that not knowing. They are responding to their own need for that to be true. Because if you know your worth, if you can see clearly what you bring and what you deserve in return, then the thing they want to do, the less than they want to offer, the benefit they want to extract without matching it in kind becomes impossible. Your clarity is a direct threat to their agenda. And so they convince themselves that the clarity does not exist, that the intelligence behind your eyes is not quite as sharp as it appears, that the stillness in you that they are reading as passive is actually passive rather than what it actually is, which is the specific, watchful, seeing everything stillness of someone who is paying complete attention and simply choosing not to show all of their cards. That misreading of your stillness is where their miscalculation began. Let me speak to the stuck piece specifically, because it was the second thing that arrived in this reading, and it carries its own particular quality of wrongness that deserves its own examination. They thought you were stuck, meaning they thought your current circumstances, whatever version of your life they encountered when they were making their assessment, was the permanent version, the ceiling version, the this is as far as this person goes version. They looked at where you were and concluded that where you were was where you would remain, not because they had any real evidence for that conclusion, but because it was useful for them to believe it. Because stuck people are easier to underestimate. Stuck people, in the mind of someone operating from the particular kind of self-interest that produces this category of miscalculation, are people who can be handled, who are not going anywhere that changes the power dynamic of whatever situation you have constructed with them in mind, who will continue to need you or continue to be available to you, or continue to be manageable in whatever way you have been managing them, because they do not have the resources or the momentum or the awareness of their own options to do anything different. They thought you were that, Virgo. They thought you were the stuck version of yourself, the version that is defined by current circumstances rather than by actual capacity, the version that has been temporarily limited by a season of difficulty or constraint or limited visibility, and that they mistook because it suited them to mistake it for the permanent version. I want to say something about that mistake very directly. Mistaking a Virgo's current circumstances for their permanent ceiling is one of the most reliably consequential errors a person can make, because Virgos do not stay stuck. Not because of some mystical quality of your sign, but because of something real and observable about how you actually function. You assess, you plan, you identify with extraordinary precision exactly what needs to shift and in what order and through what specific sequence of actions. And then quietly, without announcing the process or requiring an audience for the work, you move incrementally, deliberately, with the specific patience of someone who understands that sustainable progress is built rather than performed. They were watching the building phase and mistaking it for stasis. And I need to pause here because something is arriving very specifically for different groups of you, and I do not want to collapse them into one another without honoring each version of this situation directly. For some of you, what this person was trying to take advantage of was emotional. They saw someone who cared, someone who invested, someone who extended genuine feeling and genuine effort toward a connection, and they decided that caring was a form of dependency they could use. That your investment in the relationship, whatever form it took, was evidence of need rather than evidence of generosity. And they shaped their behavior accordingly, calibrating what they gave based not on what was fair or honest or reciprocal, but on the minimum required to maintain your investment without actually matching it. They were farming your caring, Virgo, and they thought you could not see it. For others, this is professional or material in nature, someone who saw your skills, your vision, your specific and extraordinary capacity for doing what you do, and who decided that the gap between what you understood yourself to be worth in concrete terms and what you actually were worth was a gap they could profit from. Who gave you less than you deserved, financially or in terms of recognition or in terms of the power and the platform that your actual contributions warranted, because they had concluded that you would accept it. And for a few of you, this is about narrative. Someone who decided they could control the story of who you are in the minds of the people around you. Who thought that your reputation, your image, the way others perceive and value you, was something they had the power to shape because they had decided you were not sufficiently aware of your own standing to protect it? Each of these versions carries the same essential architecture. Someone who decided your worth was smaller than it is and who tried to operate within that fiction. Have you felt this? The specific, low grade, hard to name quality of being underestimated by someone with an agenda. Not the honest underestimation of someone who simply has not yet had the chance to see you fully, but the particular kind that carries within it the specific investment of someone who needs you to be smaller than you are, because your actual size is inconvenient for them? Let me know in the comments because I feel this is landing in a very precise place for a significant number of you. Now, let me speak to the part of this reading that I think you most need to hear today. The part that is not about what they thought or what they tried, but about what actually happened as a result of all of it. They underestimated you comprehensively across every dimension of what they assumed about your intelligence, your awareness, your sense of your own value, and your capacity to see clearly what was being done and why. And here is what you did with that underestimation, Virgo. And I want you to hear this very carefully because I think it is the most important thing I am going to say in this entire reading. You saw it from the beginning, or close enough to the beginning, that by the time anything significant was at stake, you already had a clear internal picture of exactly what was happening. Your extraordinary discernment, the specific, surgical, cannot be fooled by surface quality of a Virgo intelligence that is actually operating at full capacity, registered the misalignment between what was being presented and what was actually true immediately, not slowly, not after significant damage had been done, immediately. And you did something with that, seeing that. I want to name specifically because it reveals something important about who you are and how you operate. You did not react, you observed, you continued to watch. You allowed the situation to continue long enough to gather the complete picture, to confirm what your instincts had already told you, to accumulate enough clear, undeniable information that when you eventually moved, your movement was not reactive or emotional or driven by anything other than the completely grounded, completely clear, completely devastating clarity of someone who simply knows. That patience, that specific quality of watching without reacting while the person on the other side of the situation continued operating under the assumption that they were not being watched at all, is the thing that produced everything that is now unfolding in your favor. I want to speak to what is happening for this person right now because their current interior experience is part of what this reading is delivering, and it carries its own particular quality of information. They are in the process of understanding that they were wrong, not all at once, not with the clean, single moment quality of a sudden realization that arrives completely and fully formed. In the grinding, incremental, this keeps not working the way it should, way that chronic miscalculation eventually produces when reality stops cooperating with the fiction built on top of it. Things are not going the way they expected. The dynamic they constructed on the foundation of their assessment of you is not behaving according to its design. Something about you is not matching the model they built. Some piece of how you are moving, what you are doing, what you are choosing, what you are no longer accepting, what you are no longer available for, is creating friction in the architecture of what they put together. And that friction is producing in them a specific and deeply uncomfortable experience. The experience of being wrong about someone you were certain about, of having built something on an assumption that is now revealing itself to be insufficient, of realizing gradually and against genuine resistance that the person you decided was not smart enough to see what you were doing has been seeing it the entire time. The specific quality of that realization, Virgo, is something I feel very clearly in their energy. It is not pleasant. It carries with it a retroactive rewrite of every interaction, every assumption, every moment they operated with the confidence of someone who believed they had the full picture. Seeing those moments through the lens of what they now understand you were actually perceiving in them is not a comfortable experience. Good, says the universe, and I am inclined to agree. Inhale with me for a second, Virgo, because I want to say something about your own experience of this situation that I think deserves to be named directly rather than left as subtext. You have been carrying something, not loudly, not in the way that would have given anything away or confirmed their assessment or provided any kind of visible evidence of being affected by what was being done. In the quiet, internal, entirely private way that Virgos carry difficult things when they are in the process of assessing them, turning the situation over, understanding every facet of it, deciding what to do with what they know, that carrying has had a cost. I want to acknowledge that cost clearly because this reading, in its vindication of your intelligence and your worth, should not skip past the real experience of having been in a situation where someone tried to take advantage of your generosity or your skills or your care or your current circumstances. Being on the receiving end of that kind of calculated underestimation, even when you see it clearly, even when you are fully in possession of what is actually happening, is not nothing. It costs something. In energy, in the particular kind of weariness that comes from managing knowledge you are not yet ready to act on, in the simple human experience of being treated as less than what you are by someone who decided to make a calculation rather than offer you honest engagement. That cost is real, and you are allowed to acknowledge it fully, even in the middle of a reading that is fundamentally about your vindication. Let me speak now to what comes next, because the energy does not stop at the miscalculation being revealed and the person who made it being confronted with their wrongness. It moves forward into territory that I feel is significantly more favorable to you than what has been the case in the recent period this situation has occupied. There is a correction coming. Not in the sense of anyone sitting down and having a formal conversation about what was done and why it was wrong, though for some of you, that conversation may be part of what arrives, in the sense of reality reasserting itself in the practical, material, daily life consequence way that it eventually always does when something has been built on a distorted foundation. The distortion is collapsing. What was constructed on the assumption that you did not know your worth is finding that the foundation it was built on does not actually exist. And things built on foundations that do not exist do not stand indefinitely. They settle, they crack, they reveal the emptiness beneath them in ways that become increasingly visible and increasingly impossible to sustain through any amount of additional management. What comes after the collapse for you specifically is something I feel with real clarity and real warmth. A reconfiguration, a settling of things into their actual proper proportions rather than the distorted ones that someone else's agenda produced. Your worth, which was always what it was, regardless of what anyone decided about it, becoming visible and legible and responded to correctly in the practical circumstances of your life. Not because someone finally acknowledged it graciously, because it simply became impossible to deny. Let me speak to the people who have been watching this situation from the outside because their energy is present in this reading in a way that matters. There are people in your orbit who saw what was happening before you were ready to name it out loud, who noticed the specific quality of the dynamic and who felt in their own bodies the wrongness of it, who watched someone treat you as less than what you are and who had their own response to that watching. Sometimes helpless because they understood it was not their situation to address, and sometimes quietly furious on your behalf in the way that people who genuinely care about you get furious when they see you being undervalued. These people are going to witness what is unfolding now with the specific satisfaction of people who knew, who saw it coming, who held their own version of the clarity you have been holding, and who are now watching reality catch up to what they understood was always true. Let them be part of this moment. Let their witnessing of the correction be something you receive alongside the correction itself. You have not been alone in seeing this clearly. And the people who saw it with you deserve to share in the arrival of what clarity eventually produces. As I bring this reading toward its close, Virgo, I want to say something that I think is the truest and most essential message within everything that has come through today. Nobody gets to decide your worth for you. That sounds simple. It is not, because the particular kind of situation this reading describes, where someone constructs an entire dynamic on the foundation of a decided assessment of your value, can, over time, create a kind of atmospheric pressure around you that makes their assessment feel more real than it actually is. Not because you believe it consciously, but because sustained exposure to being treated as less than what you are has a cumulative effect that even the clearest, most grounded, most self aware person has to actively resist. I I want to say clearly that what I feel in your energy right now is not someone who has been broken by that pressure. What I feel is someone who has held their own worth as an internal, private, completely certain knowing through an external environment that was trying to contradict it, who maintained the clarity of self knowledge even when the immediate circumstances of their life were not reflecting that knowledge back to them accurately. That maintenance, that quiet, unannounced, entirely private refusal to accept someone else's assessment as the truth of your value is the foundation of everything that is now shifting in your favor. They thought you were stupid. They thought you were stuck. They thought you did not recognize your own worth. And you sat with everything you actually are in complete quiet, and you waited for reality to make the introduction that their perception had failed to make. Reality is making it now, Virgo, right on time. If this reading moved something real and specific in you today, please share it with a Virgo who needs to feel this energy right now. And leave me a comment below. Tell me what it felt like to hear this named out loud. Tell me how long you have been carrying the knowledge of what this person actually thought about you. Tell me what is shifting right now in the practical circumstances of your life that confirms what this reading is describing. I read every single word you share with me, every comment, every story. I carry your energy with genuine care long after this video ends. Until next time, Virgo. They calculated wrong every single time. And the universe, as it always does, kept the receipts.